Okay, thank you. Good morning. I think we're live. Welcome. I see nodding heads. I think that means the technology is working. Yay! Good morning. I'm Chris. I'm from LogicMonitor. We're happy to have you here. This is one of the first shows that I've been to where if you don't like the show, you can actually change the channel, which I think is kind of cool. So we hope you all choose our channel. And if you can convince somebody else to go change their channel over there and put it on pink, then there might be a prize in it for you as well. Today we're going to talk about Not My Fault and the finger-pointing blame game that's associated with IT ops. We're going to have some fun with that. I want to introduce a couple of friends that I brought with me today. I've got Mike and Nitin, who have joined us from Synoptek. They're going to introduce themselves in just a moment. They represent both the build and run side of the shop, which brings really interesting storytelling because whether we live on one side or the other, we depend on the other side. We're going to tell you lots more about that today. Our discussion today is going to walk through a variety of little topics here. We're going to start by talking about what the problem really is. And if you're here, you're probably living it. IT operations, cloud operations, and a variety of other names all live under the same problem space. Whose problem is it? We're going to talk about hybrid observability, a lot of buzzwords in there, so we're going to break that down a little bit for you, and talk about the journey to cloud and how hybrid has affected that. Synoptek's going to tell you about their journey and the things that they've learned and experienced and the successes that they've experienced, and maybe you can adopt some of those same lessons as well. And then of course we're going to finish up with some AI because everybody's talking about it and we've got some great things to talk to you about there as well. So to begin, Nitin, thank you for joining us today. Introduce yourself please. Tell us a bit about Synoptek and who you are.
Hey, good morning all. This is Nitin Pandya. I'm the Director of Cloud Operations with Synoptek. And if you talk about the Synoptek is one of the largest managed services company which provide more than 1,200 plus customers and 15 different geographical locations. And we have 50 plus partners alliances with us. Mainly we are focusing on the customers, those who are on the cloud platform and the hybrid platforms over here. We have different locations where we are providing some sort of a managed services services to them. Especially I'll tell you about some sort of more about the managed services part.
Yeah, I think the audience might really want to understand what is a managed service provider, an MSP. It's probably a term that's not familiar to everybody.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So let's take one step back. Let me explain about the managed services. Like our company is more responsible to provide a proactive monitoring for the customers and their workload, what they are putting over there, especially consistently we are tracking and their systems, and we are just make sure that we are preventing from any kind of any type of any downtime or any outages over there. Secondly, we are managing their specific strategic decisions, specifically when they have to move, what needs to be done, any upgrade and any future alignment with their existing workload and all these things.
So you do their IT for them because you can do it better than them.
Better than them, of course. Okay. And we are the one who can help them to put we reduce their overhead about their local IT resources. Instead of that, we put our resources that those who can more skilled and immediately they can help across the all the skill set what they are looking for them. We are the follow the sun model kind of thing, where we have a different geographical location where we have put it our resources across the globe, so that wherever time zone our customer is, at least they can get a local resources with the skill set what they are looking for their business, and we can deliver it that way.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you.
So I want to start by talking about a story that is probably very familiar to all of you. And if we called it a game, the game would be called Whose Problem Is It Anyway? I want you to think about the last time, if you have any association with IT or CloudOps, when you were called to work on something probably in the middle of the night. My story started many years ago. I was working at IBM. I was assigned to a global financial services firm, and every time they had a problem, they would call everybody to all fires. That was the philosophy at the time. And honestly, it turned into a bit of a blame game. And culturally, at that time, there was a hot potato philosophy that said once a problem is identified, someone got stuck with the postmortem on it and had to basically account for that root cause, and they basically got a demerit of some kind that they had to work through later on. And so everybody would use whatever tools they had to monitor the environment and prove that the problem was not their fault. It wasn't really working on trying to solve the problem. It was more just trying to prove that, nope, this one doesn't belong to me. Now that might be in a bit of an extreme case, and the picture that you see here is not of that, but is of that time. This is from a long time ago. I pulled this out of my archives, but this picture I think describes what you probably live in. It's still done today, although it looks very different. We don't stand around, but you see the folks here who are kind of looking at one another like, I don't know where the problem is, do you know where it is? And I think we still do have a lot of that, though it's probably more on Zoom or Teams or Slack on some kind of a bridge call today. There's a lot of things that we learn from this philosophy, and even if your culture isn't one that's really focused on finger pointing, we still have so many different tools that are out there, and if you walk around a show floor, you'll see no end of that. A while back, someone explained this to me in a way that really hit me hard. They said they felt like with all the tools that they had, like they had 14 different watches on, and they still had no idea what time it was. And I felt like that really kind of pinpointed for me what it was like to live in this world. And then vendors show up and say, yo, I got another tool for you. And all that really does is add another watch to your wrist, and doesn't really help you figure out what time it is, or more importantly, when it's time to leave for the airport or anything like that. And so this problem of finger pointing is not just a cultural thing, but it also means that the time to solve a problem, or the MTTR, is generally a whole lot longer than it needs to be. In my responsibilities, I get to go around the world and talk to many, many different enterprises, and we get to peek behind the curtain at shops like yours, and we learn a lot of really interesting things. One of the things that really surprises me is that we can all still be better at mean time to resolution. MTTI sometimes is the term that's used. Mean time to innocence. Some folks say identification, but I think innocence becomes a term that you hear as well. And so this is the problem we're here to lay out for you today, and Synoptek's going to talk to you a bit about what they did to solve for it. So Mike, I want to have you introduce yourself a little bit, talk about your responsibilities. You're on the build side of the shop, where Nitin's on the run side. Explain what you do in the Ops Center.
I'm responsible for LogicMonitor. I'm the subject matter expert, building new things and making sure that people have access to what they need in LogicMonitor. Before LogicMonitor, I was in charge of the other tools.
We call that the before times.
Yeah, the before times. You mentioned the blame game, and we really experience that. Sometimes it's the teams, but a lot of times it's it's
really the vendors, isn't it?
Well, but the tools themselves saying, hey, this device is up over here, and this one, it's the same device not up in the other tool, or something like that. So it caused a lot of problems, a lot of headaches for our...
Did you ever have a time where one tool said red and another said green, and you weren't really sure which one to listen to?
Sure, it happens pretty regularly.
How did you deal with
that kind of situation? Well, our engineers spent a lot of time checking, which one's right. Okay, you got this thing that's red. You got to go log in somewhere, find the credentials, access the device. Is it really red? Is it telling? Can it tell you it's red? Then you can take some action. So your mean time to resolution goes up because you're spending a lot of cycles figuring out if there's a problem in the first place.
That reminds me of an outage, and I've seen this, and raise your hand if you've seen this as well. A big outage happens, everybody's in trouble, big boss comes in because it affected some sort of business continuity, and someone says, why weren't we monitoring this? And then what's the answer? The answer is we were. It's almost the worst answer. It's almost worse than saying we weren't, because we just didn't know which tool to look at and which one to believe. And it feels like here we are 10 plus years later still talking about that same stuff, and I don't think we've held ourselves accountable enough to improve the way that we really need to in that space. Anything else about the Ops Center you want to share?
It's better now, but I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Okay, good. Well, Nitin, you've got 1,200 customers that you support. Talk to me about the before times on your side of the shop.
So whenever we take a customer as a managed customer with Synoptek, they come with a set of tools which they are already with their infrastructure. Many times they come up with, like I can use SolarWind or some other tools which they are or they explicitly need a different skill set of engineers, those who can monitor their workload. And if we have more than 1,000 plus customers, then if we take an example, I need one or two engineers with the same skill set into a different shift, where we have to put it on the shift.
Not a lot of repeatability there.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's the whole point. And that's why it is very difficult for us to maintain and manage the multiple tool sets just for a monitoring prospect.
So I think you're kind of getting to maybe the financial cost
As
of,
well
of
as
the finger pointing. It's
yeah,
not just a cultural thing,
cultural
right?
thing. Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely.
You'd have to staff up for all of those 14
Yeah,
different tools.
and the biggest problem is that we have to put the person into 3 different shifts because it's a rotational
Everything's
24
times
into
3.
6, right? So 3 engineers for single tool every time. So which will take operational cost and the overall burden on the licensing and lot of things. As our solutions, we took LogicMonitors. And once we come on the LogicMonitor, everything was seamless. It's a just single.
But you're getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah, but that's the whole point how we come. But these are the real challenges we are facing before
Thank you.
LogicMonitors. Yeah.
So I want to just introduce you a little bit to LogicMonitor. I'm going to assume that some of you have never heard of LogicMonitor before. In those before times, I hadn't heard of LM, as we call it, either. But rather than give you a whole presentation on what LogicMonitor does, I want to talk about the problems that we help solve. And so what you're looking at here is a cloud journey. LogicMonitor is a hybrid observability platform. We say that we're hybrid observability powered by AI. And what that means is, in the picture that you're looking at here, is if you think about a cloud journey, each of you and your organizations are on this journey. And if we were here some years ago, we would have said that the right side of this picture was the destination of the journey, that we were trying to get all of the things in our data center ultimately refactored into cute little containers, and we would run them in Kubernetes or something, and we would probably put them in the cloud. There was a real cloud-first motion. And what we've seen happen here post-COVID, you're all living this as well, is that there's still a move to cloud, obviously. The folks that we talk to are only about 40% migrated to cloud. There are very few who are completely done with that. And hybrid becomes not just a transitionary state, but is in fact itself the end point. It is the destination. Hybrid meaning you will always have things that are in all 4 of these stages that will live there, frankly, in perpetuity. And with the emergence of AI now, we see that even happening more. We see that the direction isn't always just to the right, but sometimes there's direction to the left as well. What we do to help with this is that we de-risk that move to cloud. When you're trying to move from any one of these stages to another stage, you've got to measure what's happening before, during, and after. You've got to show that the new position works at least as good and is less expensive than the thing you were doing before. And that can be really hard to do, especially if you've got 14 watches on and you're measuring these things with different measurements. So this cloud journey becomes a really nice way, and I love to see that a couple of you are taking pictures of this. This has been an enduring way for us to describe what's going on in our market and in operations, because you can point to exactly where you are. You're probably thinking right now, oh, I'm somewhere between stage 2 and stage 3. Lots of folks will say something like that. And I have this department that's over here doing that stage 4 stuff. And I have these other things that are never going to move off of the on-prem environment. And you start to get a context for these things, and typically we have solved for them individually. What I'm asking you to do now is to solve more holistically for it and to go more for breadth rather than just focusing on the depth of any one part of this. This de-risking of the move to cloud helps you to go faster, it helps you to be more responsible with what you're spending, and it helps to create better MTTR and outcomes, especially if you're a service provider, to make sure that your customers, whether they're internal or external, are experiencing the services that this tech is holding up in the way that is designed. To show you a little bit more about this, I want to show you a reference architecture. And there's a lot of squares on here, and we're not going to go through all of them individually, but I want to break it into some categories to help you understand how we see the world. There are really 3 different steps here, and this is all about that blame game. If you think about the before times, think about the cloud journey that we were just looking at, there's a real fracture in IT. Somebody shows up and says, I'm the best on the planet at network monitoring. Somebody else shows up and says, oh yeah, well I'm the best at SD-WAN. And then down the street you got someone who says, oh yeah, well I'm better than you at Kubernetes. And there's been this fight, I actually call it an arms race, that's been happening about trying to get more data and more data. If we start to break this apart and build it up, the first thing that you need to solve for is just coverage. You need to be able to comfortably say, yes, I'll monitor all the things. I don't care if they're on-prem. I don't care where they are in the cloud, whether they're IaaS or PaaS. They can be in multiple clouds. They could be containerized if they need to be. They could just be lifted and shifted. I don't really care if it's metrics or events or logs or traces. Let's talk about that for a quick second. In those before times, and at shows like this, there has been, especially in the topic of observability, a lot of ink that has been spilled on whether a metric an event, a log, or a trace was the best kind of data. And we've kind of like warred on this. It gets very philosophical sometimes. And I think we've come to a point now where MELT, as we call it, or metrics, events, logs, and traces, we kind of don't care anymore about which one's the best. We just want to nod our head and say yes. They're just signals. They come from lots of different places, and we want to put them all into one platform. Once they're in a platform, then we want to build up from that, and we want to offer an opinion on all of that data. In years past, I'm going to have you talk about this in just a second, but in years past, it feels like the space that we're in required you, the engineer, you, the operator, to offer an opinion on the data. And if you were a successful IT ops shop, it's because you had enough smart men and women who knew how to interact with all this MELT data, as they called it at the time, and knew how to see through it and find the problems. Think about a book like The Phoenix Project, for example, if you've read that book. You think about Brent in that book. It's a great example of this. And when you think those smart people are saving you, you actually realize that they're also your bottleneck. And so the pivot that I think we're going through now is to offer an opinion on the data so that no matter who the operator is, they have more skill than they would maybe have brought themselves to the story. Ultimately, what does that mean for the business? Well, I think it should mean that a level 2 problem can be handled by a level 1 person, or a 3 can be done by a 2. And as we push that down, then we start to change the economics of how we solve problems, but more importantly, that time. And I'll have you speak on that here momentarily. Once we offer an opinion on top of that, then we want to represent it in the workflow, in the work surface that is most appropriate for the persona that we're dealing with. We don't all have the same jobs here. And I think frequently vendors show up saying, here's my tool, here's how you interact with it, you click here, you click here, you click there. Well, that's not always the right way. You might be an SRE, you might be in CloudOps, you might work more on-prem and have more static environments that are not changing frequently, and you want to interact with it a different way. What you really want is things like your metrics and your logs side by side, so that the metric tells you that there is a problem, regardless of where that problem is at, and the log tells you something more about the root cause of it, so you can solve that thing more quickly. I think that's your world that you're living in, and have that be a natural workflow that's appropriate for the persona at hand. That's the view that we see in the world. Now, on top of that, there's the application of what we call Edwin AI. I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes, but it's effectively I'm going to use the phrase exoskeleton that we put on top of operations to help you lift more than you would ever be able to lift on your own. We're going to come back to that a little bit later. So thanks for that moment to just kind of explain all of that. Now I want to put that on top of what's happening at Synoptek. And so, Mike, if I can ask you, please, tell us a little bit more about what life was like inside that world of metrics, events, logs, and traces, and all the other tools.
Well, yeah, in the before times. We, Synoptek has grown through acquisition a lot, and we had half a dozen monitoring tools. Each company brought their own, and we had to swivel chair. Our enterprise operations center was watching 6 tools, looking for alerts and anomalies.
Remember the times when we had those big command center walls?
Yeah.
You go tour people in them in the dark room, and you're trying to show how big and all the TVs you had?
We had that.
Did you?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the problem, not the solution, isn't it?
Yeah, it's better now.
Anybody still have one of those?
But yeah, so too many tools. We talked briefly about the difference in reporting from different tools. This one says this device is green, this one says it's red. Also, without any kind of, broad ability to tune, you end up with lots and lots of noise because, you're just spread out.
Noise in the form of what?
Lots of alerts for things that probably don't matter.
Okay.
If a server CPU spikes up for 1 minute, pops back down, it's one CPU in a cluster, one server in a cluster, you're going to get an alert, but who cares? The cluster was fine, the server is fine after that spike goes down, but you have to deal with that alert.
And transitory, by the time you get there, it's gone.
Yeah.
I feel like if we had a moment of truth and said, put your hand up, if you have that, I think every single person would have to put their hands up. That's just it's the state of the world, and we've allowed that too long, probably.
Yep.
Okay, anything else you want to share?
Yeah, well, on the third box, we've got cloud cost too high. All of these tools that we were using before, some examples include, Nimbus or Microsoft's System Center Operations Manager.
Good old SCOM.
SCOM, yeah. They're agent-based. They know about me, the server. They don't tell me anything about how I'm interacting with other resources or what I'm costing the business to run. So high cost, low visibility into that kind of stuff.
Okay.
On top of it, it's lots of time to investigating those logs.
Yes.
SCCM give you logs, but you should be skilled enough to understand what's going wrong. And it may take hours and hours to identify, and you will be completely screwed up your customer business.
I would imagine that teams like yours, that's where you get really good at learning regular expressions. And I didn't really know the term grep before I was in operations, but now we grep our way through everything, at least in the Linux, Unix world. You control F your way through everything in Windows, I think. But that's just how problems are solved.
Yes.
It's long. It's not very repetitive, is it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, everything is bespoke. Every problem is bespoke.
So talk, both of you, please, about how does that change with the introduction of LogicMonitor in your environment?
Well, LogicMonitor is one pane of glass. I mean, you alluded to it earlier, and this slide really kind of demonstrates it. Do you want to monitor cloud resources, cloud loads? Sure, you can do that. Do you want to monitor your on-prem, your networks, your Windows, your storage? I said Windows, I meant servers.
Windows too.
Yeah. What about performance and containers? Like, it's all there. You don't have to worry about, what tool are your employees looking at right now? If they're looking at LogicMonitor, they're looking at the place where there's going to be an alert, regardless of the source. So, it covers everything.
What are the limitations?
There's not a lot of limitations.
So what if you get asked, so you have all these as a service provider, you have all these customers. So a new customer comes in tomorrow, they're going to ask you to monitor a flux capacitor. Can you monitor it?
Sure, probably. If I can reach it, absolutely. And sometimes even if I can't reach it, something else can. We had in one of our data centers where we host customer infrastructure, we had a device that was not network connected, but it was connected to a Raspberry Pi via serial cable. And at some point, somebody had written a little Python script that runs on the Pi and grabs some data and just displayed it, as pretty JSON on a web page. And they realized that they had to watch that separate from LogicMonitor. And they said, hey, can we get this in there? And I said, yeah, absolutely, no problem. I wrote very easily a data source to go and just grab that data.
So the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
And the biggest benefit is over here is not only the cloud platform, we also can manage all our hyperscale and the hybrid platform as well. And it's all at one place. We don't have to shuffle this or split all this workload into a different screens or all this thing. We can do it at one place. So that's the biggest benefit we are getting.
We probably should introduce the concept of collectors here. LogicMonitor is an agentless architecture, and those of you who have been in this space, the word agent should make you just kind of twinge a little bit, because the management of agents can take, I call it care and feeding, can take like all of your time. You spend 80% of your available manpower just trying to care for the environment and not actually using it. Talk a little bit about the collector architecture that we have here and how it's different than agents that you've used in the past.
Yeah, so one of the big problems with agents is maintaining them. If you have a new server, you have to deploy the agent. You have to know that the server exists and deploy the agent. They need to be updated from time to time. They gather a lot of data, and that's about the server itself, and that's great. But, one good thing about LogicMonitor and its agentless architecture is the collector can do that too. A lot of times the agents are just asking for a perfmon counter, for example, and displaying that. Well, LogicMonitor can do that without the need of an agent.
Pull that through WMI.
So that will help us to reduce the additional burden on any of our existing infrastructure. For example, if we are using any agent on our virtual machines, it would definitely eaten up some resources. And perfmon and other tool which we are talking right now, they are sometimes a culprit to get a lower, the performance of our overall production system as well. They are keep getting all this data delivered to their logs and all this stuff.
I'm laughing right now because you reminded me of a time when I was in ops and there was like 14 agents on this server and the combined load of the agents was higher than the load of the application.
Actually application.
And the agents were crippling the application. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back, effectively. Right. So collectors, how do they work? Where do you put them?
On a network segment. They're simple. If they have a route to the device, they can monitor it. For cloud monitoring, it's largely API based, so you don't even necessarily need a collector.
A simple API integration, and that's it.
So when you onboard new clients, how does that change the onboarding process and the time to value?
It's faster because you don't have to, you don't have to remove the agents and put your own agent on if you're swapping or just deploying your own.
You can just
Just a script.
Okay.
You have to put some, the applicable APIs, push it, and that's it. There is no agent, nothing upgrade here and there. No, everything looks streamlined, and immediately you start getting your data.
Yeah, you can tell LogicMonitor for on-prem stuff. This is use this collector. Here's the network.
Done.
And the credentials. Just go do your discovery and start monitoring.
Could you walk through some of the challenges that you have faced, that everybody faces on an ongoing basis, and how you've solved those? You've got quite a bit of content you brought for us here. Let's just walk through some of these.
So we've talked about this, some of these things a little bit. The trouble with agents and the swivel chair. That was a big one for us. There were plenty of times. I don't want to say plenty of times. There were times when, an alert was happening in one tool for too long because the engineers were, at that time, they were just watching the other one. Maybe it was busy in that other one, right? It's so easy to miss.
Okay.
So with one pane of glass, you got your list of alerts. It's all right there in front of you. Like you can always see. You always know what's going on. Another problem is not knowing, in the before times, is not knowing how things are related. So, hey, if there's a firewall down, what are the downstream impacts of that? You don't necessarily know from a tool like SCCM or SolarWinds.
How do you bring context in LogicMonitor? You talk about topology, and that's one way. How do you give more meaning to the metrics that come in? You have tens of thousands of devices that you guys monitor. How do you deal with metadata?
Well, it's a lot of tribal data, tribal knowledge. I think that's probably one of our weaknesses before LogicMonitor. But the topology mapping really helps with that because you can see in a visual way how things are connected and how alert over here impacts the applications downstream.
Yeah, what he says, I think that's one of the things. And other than that, there would be a lot of workload what we are putting, and if we are, this will help us to especially then when we put a workload, we don't know what to do next, and the other things would be it creates some sort of data points where we don't know whether it is right or it's very close to the nearby threshold limit, and that will lead into sometime unwanted outages. So that way, this will help us, especially when we put the LogicMonitor, it will give us a advanced level triggered, and this will help us a lot and save us.
So a few minutes ago, I introduced LM as having an opinion in our platform. I think that's kind of where you're getting now. Can you talk about how that gets applied, and how does it scale you up when you're trying to manage so many different clients at the same time?
Yeah, with traditional monitoring, I guess you've got your thresholds, right? And if you want to change a threshold, you can do it at the global level, or manually. You do it at global level manually, or you go down to each server, maybe each instance. If you're looking at disk thresholds or something like that, and you've got several disks on a server, so you're touching each one, and you do that across 1,000 customers with hundreds of devices apiece. It's a million things.
Becomes
I'm not a math
impossible,
guy.
doesn't it?
Yeah, you can't do it manually. So one of the things that LogicMonitor that we use is dynamic thresholds, which I have a little slide here.
You brought us a picture. Okay, great.
Yeah, that will Well, so you can see here, this is setting up a dynamic threshold. I think this one was from a CPU data source.
Okay.
So it allows you to say, hey, just tell me when things are unusual.
Tell me normal.
Yeah.
Tell me non-normal.
Yeah, exactly. Alert me when things are not normal.
Okay. And so that's the setup.
You can see that here.
And then this becomes the view in reality. So and I think this is what you're talking about.
Yep.
Now you've got the blue area that says, yo, this is normal.
Yeah.
And you'll see a little
As
red
soon
spike
as
there.
there is a spike, yeah.
Okay. And that's what your team would then use to say this thing that's happening is
Absolutely.
expected or not expected.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can set that to, alert
Alert-
at different
alert
levels,
threshold.
depending on how far outside the expected range it is.
This is, we can adjust it. The threshold can be adjusted depending on what workload you
That
are
helps
putting
push the
over
noise
there.
down
Yeah, absolutely,
in
yes.
the team? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. What kind of savings are you getting from this? You brought me a number here. Tell me a bit about this 20% number that we're looking at.
I think that's a great point which we achieve after LogicMonitor. So I can give you some sort of idea over here. Many of the platforms, especially the cloud platforms or the cloud providers, they are giving their native capabilities to have some sort of a cost optimization or some sort of data detail which you can collect it, which you can imply, you can just use them and you can save some sort of cost. But if you go very holistic approach, LogicMonitor give us a real-time overall, monitoring or whatever the utilization what we are doing at this moment. Let me go one step back and explain something over here.
Okay.
Many times it happens that the project team at the customer level, they are using their application deployed for the production.
I know
go
where you're
live.
going with this.
Yeah. So what happened to a safer side, and they don't want to screw up their go live, they do double of their size and they deploy
How
their
big of a server do you
workload.
need? And what's the answer? The biggest one.
Yeah. So nobody knows, and nobody have that prediction as soon as it's not go live. Nobody knows that. Although solution architect would be there, but they also don't have any answer at this precise answer. That okay, what exactly size
You
or
don't have the
particular
history yet.
resources? No, absolutely, because it's first time go live, and they don't know what kind of workload would be once it is go live.
Okay.
So for a safer side, what they do, they put a little bit more buffer while deploying their resources, irrespective it is EC2 instances, irrespective it is some sort of a database instance size, irrespective it is storage and all these things. So that way, and they also, sometimes very much worried about their deployment as well. Many times it happens that when they put it some sort of a deployment on the application, they don't know where exactly they are putting. Maybe they're into a different drive or maybe into a wrong drive or somewhere.
Okay.
And all of a sudden it's spike up and it's eaten up all the resources at that time. So to avoid all these things, what they do, they can just double the size and put it and deploy at that time. And they don't know. And they are putting a lot of monthly recurring cost they are paying for that. But when we put a LogicMonitor, when we review their infrastructure, we can see the monthly, daily, weekly, monthly, and 6-month data.
You see the usage curve.
Yes.
Then what do you do about it?
And then we realize, okay, technically this is go live. There is nothing to do. Everything is streamlined, and we can see, okay, this is the utilization pattern. There is a lot of things which can be, streamlined over here, and we can reduce we can do the right sizing. That way, LogicMonitor give us the real-time data with more confidence, which will we apply to make the decision to right sizing or some sort of
So you take them to a smaller
reservation.
instance size or something
Everything.
like that.
They adjust the
to
instance
save.
size and all these things. So
And
this
now
is
the
how.
platform's making recommendations.
Yeah.
You're going to have a look at that. Something we
Yeah.
just rolled out.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. So now we're going to transition. We're back to this reference architecture here. I want to take you to that top corner, to this thing that we call Edwin AI. You hear AI everywhere you go right now, and we're really sitting, I think, in a monumental time in our industry. It's not just a passing fad. I think we all know that now. I also recognize that, I've got a question for you all. How is it possible to walk around on an expo floor where you see dozens and dozens and dozens of vendors who all have AI all over their products? And how is it that those same products can be fully AI when they've been around for a long time? I feel like we as vendors owe you a little bit of an explanation on that, quite honestly, because sometimes it feels like we're stretching perhaps a little bit too far in the moment. How then do we kind of find the correct credit where you're not just bolting on a GPT wrapper somewhere or calling something by a name, but actually incorporating generative AI and AI ML algorithms throughout the products in a way that actually makes your life better? I hope that's a question that you ask of us and of others so that we can start to see through the haze a little bit here. To walk you through that, I want to just give you our perspective of this for a moment. We've been working on at LogicMonitor AI since before it was this thing that was on everybody's screens everywhere. We refer to this as foundational AI. Going as far back as 2019, we've used AI and ML algorithms as appropriate to do a variety of different things like you see here. Here's why this is so important. We're going to spend a moment here momentarily getting into Edwin AI and the generative capabilities that we have that are absolutely incredible. But in order for those things to be as great as we claim them to be, we have to observe this garbage in, garbage out principle.
Absolutely.
GIGO, if you call it that. If we're sending in garbage alerts, and you've talked to us already about how we can trim those down, then guess what we're going to get out of the AI at the end? It's obviously the same thing. And so, Mike, I wanted you to maybe talk about one of these that you've had experience with and applied as one of these precursors, these foundational elements before I get into the generative side of the house.
Yeah, aside from we didn't really talk about anomaly detection much, but there's that, and we did talk about dynamic thresholds. Another great feature is the log analysis, which allows you to visually narrow down the location of the needle in the haystack. You don't have to grep or control F through a log. You don't have to learn a new query language, like another query language. You click through the log information here, and particularly the picture on the left, screenshot on the left.
Right.
That
I guess I can't say right, can I? Yeah, left.
Yeah. So you can click through to narrow down your filter, and LogicMonitor builds the query itself and then shows you the results.
So let me restate that for a second, because I think that's important. Part of showing up with an opinion means that we can't depend on your engineers to always know exactly what question they should ask.
Yeah.
And they probably won't know how to form the query, even if they did know the question.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of really powerful tools that are out there, but they require you to go to a university level, skill set to understand how to interact with it. Mike, what you're talking about here then is kind of point and click.
Yeah, simplifying that process.
Okay. The picture that we look at on the right, and obviously it's really small for you to see there, but what you see highlighted in colors there is a sentiment analysis based on logs. It looks at all what I call the bad words that are in the log. And the bad words would be fatal and error and warning and abend and whatever other things. There's 100 and some of them. There's a lot of them that we'll pick up automatically, and then we'll put them into charts, and you just click on them, and we'll form the query for you and take it to your team so that you can see what the problem is and where the problem is without having to know details about those environments that you are unlikely to know.
Absolutely.
So that's more of that opinion that we want to bring to the equation here. So thanks for that. That's log analysis. Let's now go to Edwin AI. This is a solution set that was brought to market earlier this year. It's named after Edwin Hubble and his pursuit of cosmology and looking at the stars, basically, and trying to make sense out of all of it. And I think any of you who have spent ample time at operations, there's a little bit of that there, isn't there? You're looking into these depths of data that are really unintelligible a lot of times. There's just so much, and it's changing so much, and we, the vendors, keep bringing you more and more of it, and it's time that we bring you something that lets you see through all of that. This takes us to that concept of that exoskeleton that I mentioned earlier, and I don't know if it's a great example or not, but I think at least visually it gives you the idea of helping your teams to lift something more than they would be able to do so on their own. And I want to walk you through a little bit about what that looks like now. In order to do so, I want to introduce you to AI Ops as it was and where it needs to go. AI Ops has been around for the better part of a decade now. And frankly, when it was first coined as a term, it felt like it was merely the evolution of a thing that had been around much longer than that, being event management. Event management is this concept of saying, hey, I got lots of alerts, just like you were talking to me about.
Something happened.
And something happened. I see so many alerts. I don't know how to see through them all. I need a rules engine that I can put it all into, and it can spit out less alerts. The problem in that world was that word rules engine, however. And I think it feels like it needs a reboot. And so we'll get to a little bit more of that here momentarily, but we've coined this as next-gen AI ops right now. We know the next-gen term's not going to stick. That's fine. The industry will have a term for it. But what we're talking about here is not the same event management that you've seen in the past. This is bringing together multiple different use cases, starting with event and alert intelligence. If we could bring to bear a capability to do all of that noise reduction that is literally turnkey, that does not require rules and topology and CMDBs and all of the things that if you've been down this road in the past, you know take incredible amounts of energy to sort out and maintain and keep working in the long term. That is admission to the party in a major way. Because noise reduction, I think, is the main thing that you need to provide the SLA to your customers.
Yes.
The next thing to layer on top of that, though, is a generative AI assistant. This is where that exoskeleton starts to, I think, come alive. Let me give you an example on this. My daughter went and had a medical procedure earlier this year, and when she got done, she was given a paper that had her diagnosis on it, and of course it was full of all kinds of words she couldn't understand. So what do you think she did? Well, she went home and typed it into ChatGPT, and ultimately it said, "You're fine." And the translation layer between techno speak and "you're fine" is something that we are not terribly good at. My wife tells me that we speak a different language than normal people. And sometimes I find myself at home speaking the same way that we speak here, saying things like, "I don't have bandwidth for that. And by the way, I don't recommend that you talk that way." She looks at me and turns her head sideways and says, "Chris, that's not a real word." And I say, "Of course it is. We talk about this stuff at work all the time." She says, "No, normal people do not talk that way." Generative AI allows us to now make a translation between all of the techno-babble stuff that we have in all of these different tools plural, not just one, and say, "You're fine, you're not fine, the problem's over here. You have a production problem affecting 3 different applications with 4 different network segments, blah, blah, blah," in terms that everybody, including leadership, can understand. And we're really excited about having brought that to market. We're then working on automating repetitive work as well. What is the root cause of this thing? What should I do about it? Can I take some of the engineering talent that you're working with right now, and can I task them on higher quality problems rather than some of the repetitive stuff that's down below? And so as we look at this here, we've brought it into several phases, and hopefully it starts to take shape for you a little bit now. The phase 1 is a place that we're at right now, and this is something that we're really excited to show you in a turnkey fashion. That is what's different from the past. In the past, it was rules-based, and we are not rules-based, which means you can get incredible ROI out of this. It means you can turn the key, and within 24 hours have a 70, 80, 90% noise reduction that you can see very quickly. Then we get to the generative AI. Again, that's the tell me what the problem is in normal speak, and what if I could extend that to not just look at observability data, but also to consider other important sources. Imagine in your world, you look at all the different observability data, I'm sure, but you probably also go and look at your ITSM system. You might have a Confluence or a Wiki or some kind of a knowledge base kind of system. You've got lots of places where you keep tribal knowledge. I'm going to ask you about that in just a second. That tribal knowledge, what if the system could go and digest all of that tribal knowledge and combine it together with the observability data to offer an even stronger opinion on what a root cause is? That is where we're going with this. And that should, if you've been in this business for more than 5 minutes, that should get you incredibly excited, because that is where we spend so much time. And that's why when so-and-so walks out the door, we're all so sad, because so much of what they know is in their heads and not anywhere that can be reused. So we're really excited about that one. And that takes us then, once we know what the right problem is, to the third phase. I want to offer a quick caution on this. Many of you, when I come and talk to you, you say things like, "I need automation. I want to go fast. I want to be able to do the thing fast." And I offer a caution that says, well, let's be careful, because if you don't do it in the right order, you're just going to do the wrong thing faster. Because the problems that we have are very complex. This isn't just a, "Oh no, I need to restart the server" thing. I think you're probably pretty good at that already today. It's far more complex. And so if we jump too quickly to automation, then you're just going to do the wrong thing faster. So getting that corpus of knowledge collected together, that is both observability and what we call knowledge hubs, will give us better permission to go to automation in a way that is responsible and that we can have kind of courage on, because we know that it's making better decisions than just the knee-jerk restart kind of a thing. So Mike, tell us a bit about where you are on this journey and what kind of results you're seeing so far.
We're pretty early on, but we're seeing good results. We've used the foundational AI stuff, the dynamic thresholds and anomaly detection, to really reduce the number of alerts. But there's still, Neaton's teams tell me all the time, there's still a lot of alerts.
So you get them down from hundreds of thousands to less hundreds of thousands?
Yeah, thousands,
Thousands,
tens
right.
of thousands. But there's still more work to be done, but and that's where we're looking for Edwin to help us. And so as we've just started using Edwin to reduce our alert count, we've had really good results. I mean, this is a big number.
That's a big number.
Both physically on the screen and
That's true.
operationally.
It is a big number.
And this is without essentially zero configuration or tuning of any kind. Like, this is almost out of the box.
That feels like that's the headline more than the 80% even,
Yeah,
is the work that it takes to get to this. Because
Yeah.
in the past, this was a professional services heavy kind of implementation.
Yeah, and touching a lot of stuff still. What we've done for Edwin is essentially just tell it, hey, here's our data, and here's how we organize our customers in LogicMonitor. What can you tell us? And this has been the result. So we look forward to really working on improving this too. But
So it's an incredible result. So Nitin, I want to turn it to you and ask then, what does it mean on the run side of the shop if you can reduce by 80% the volume of alerts that are coming into your team?
The first thing would be like our L1 engineers, those who are appointed to see the continuous monitoring the glass for all the alerts. That is no longer needed to do this because we are out of that kind of repeated work. It doesn't mean that they doesn't have any job or they would be out of that. We will put them into more proactive or some business strategical work, and we can assign them over
That's
there.
a really important point, I think. You've touched on something here that's incredibly important. In this AI movement, there's a lot of fear, especially in IT operations, that there will be no room left for people at the table once the music stops.
Yeah.
And I think you're speaking very differently about this. Talk a little bit more. What are they going to do instead?
They are putting into some sort of other more skilled work, which we have with us, especially the high skilled work more into the DevOps operation support or
Higher
something
value
like
adds,
high
right?
value, something like that. The other benefit what we can see over here is the better response time. So the manual response would take more time because they have to adjust, they have to understand what is going on, and that's all this thing. After introducing this feature, it would be immediately available what to do. So there is no manual, error would be over there. The third and very important thing, which is more important for our customer, the service level agreement would be way better than what we have earlier before this.
You're delivering a better quality of
Better
service.
quality of
And I
services.
imagine one that's more valuable competitively
Yeah.
for you and your business.
Absolutely. So
Wonderful.
That's the whole point, yeah.
So if I can offer a suggestion for a moment, those of you that work anywhere near operations teams, there's going to be a very real fear now and in the future about, is there room for me in this AI world, or is it going to come and take my job? And I think the way that you can describe it to folks is that it's going to let you kind of move up the value chain a bit. And those who wish to will not need to proverbially rub sticks together to make fire anymore, but instead we're going to just fire up the barbecue, and now we're going to work on serving up some yummy meals rather than on how we go make the fire go in the first place. And I think when we look at it that way, this is a really exciting juncture for all of us, because now we don't have to do the things that are hard. I don't have to go grep or control F my way through all the logs. I don't have to find what the right threshold is on the thing, and I don't have to correlate 1,000 different things together because I'm smarter than somebody else in the room, which I am not. And I can instead say, the problem is here, it's affecting this application, and it's been happening this long, and here's how we think it should be fixed because this is how it was fixed in the past. That feels like a much more fun conversation for all of us.
The other biggest benefit, which I think I missed in my previous discussion, the point is manually you can some sort of alert was generated and they clear up immediate after 30 seconds. And people feel, okay, it's nothing great. But technically, if we assign this admin over there, like this will go with the root cause and we give us a more clear idea what exactly the error was and how it can be impact later on.
That is another really interesting comment because when you're underwater in all of these alerts, all you can work on is the most severe ones. So you only work on critical kinds of things.
Yeah.
The problem then is, it's kind of like an analogy of saying, well, I'm only going to send the fire engine to houses that are on fire and burning down. But a house that has a smoke alarm going off, well, we're going to drive past that one because that's not important to us right now. And I think part of what you're saying is, well, if the smoke alarm's because there's a fire starting, we could stop there and put that one out and save a whole lot of problem in the first place, because we now can get more proactive on it as opposed to only working on these 5-alarm blaze kinds of things. And can the AI help me distinguish between the two in a way that is much more powerful?
Because it's not, like I would say that not a single alert, slip from the crack.
Right.
Because
Right.
manually you can avoid some, but this technology doesn't allow, and we will fix each and every single
Sees
alert.
everything.
Yes, sir.
Sounds like a movie. Okay, well, we're just winding up here. Thanks. What have we learned together this hour? First of all, we talked about the concept of the blame game. And no matter how it lives in your environment, I want you to see that it is there. It may be culturally there, but it may be there just in the tools that you're using, where one says red and another says green. And if that's not a priority in your world, it's one that I want you to consider focusing on as how to move that ball forward in your own organization. Secondly, there's way too much data that's out there. And instead of arguing about who has better data, can we use that energy instead to talk about offering an opinion on top of that data and putting context on top of it and having it kind of ready to use for outcomes and problem resolution workflows rather than on just all of the care and feeding of acquisition and management of that data. Next, we got into the savings that you've experienced. And if your customers are saving 20% just on the cloud spend alone, I think there's a massive MTTR improvement here that is operational efficiency that very much justifies this kind of work. And then we got into AI and how it's shifting the entire surface of what this space around operations is all about. Whether it's foundational AI that gives us a better quality of alert in the first place, or Edwin AI that sits on top and gives you that exoskeleton to help your teams lift more than they would be able to on their own. You're probably interested in learning a little bit more about this than just high-level slides. So we encourage you, if you want to walk like 17 miles back to the expo floor, oh my gosh, it's far. Stop for snack on the way so you don't expire. But have a look, come and see us for a demo. We've got some of the best prizes out there on the floor, and we want you to maybe participate in that a little bit. And we've got a few minutes here for some questions as well. Mike, Nitin, I want to thank you for spending some time and peeling back the curtain a little bit on what your organization is doing with LogicMonitor, and we appreciate your partnership. We thank you for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your show.
Thank you.
Thanks.